Hi, I'm Ash and welcome to this video where we will be looking at the new Swift Foiling FR range of boards. For this video I had two examples to test, the 63 litre and the 73 litre. But first let's just have a quick overview of what Swift Foiling say about this new board range. First, this is a Freeride board. It is designed to sit between the mid-length boards, which are typically over 6 foot long, and the NG boards, which are Swift Foiling's previous Freeride or freestyle design. The board itself comes only in carbon construction, not carbon Integra. This is for lightness and for stiffness. Lastly, the design is narrower and longer than a typical Freeride or freestyle board. This is for quick release onto foil, with the narrower outline generating speed more easily and the tail rocker creating a lifting effect for the board as it accelerates. So that is the bullet points. Let's have a look over the 73 litre version of the board before we get onto the details of how they ride. If you previously watched my mini review of the Duotone Skybrid, then it's fair to say that the overall dimensions of these new FR boards are fairly close to that of the Skybrid in its different sizes. However, it would not be fair to say that the designs are the same, as they really aren't. If I compare the 73 litre FR to the previous NG board, then we have a more bulbous nose and there is definitely more volume up front as well as more length to that nose. It is quite obviously both thinner and longer than the NG, and there is a little more roundness to the rails. The deck has a little concave to it, but not too much, which results in quite a flat deck to the edges, which makes the board more comfortable and also extends its width right to the rail edge, whereas a more pronounced concave would narrow the board's standing area. The NG flattens off to a very hard rail towards the rear and is a thicker board section, whereas the new FR is thinner. The NG is totally flat at the rear, whereas the FR has a tail rocker that is designed to lift the nose as you start to plane. We have long tracks for the mast by default, and there is no double concave at the front. It's not totally flat through this front section, and there is a tiny amount of single concave leading into the more bulbous nose. The tail is not a pinch tail, but is narrower than the NG, but not like the pinch tail that you would see on mid-length boards. It's actually wider and sort of comes to a little bit of a point in the middle. Swift Foiling described the FR as a merge of their mid-length boards and the NG, and I'd say this is a fairly good description. It doesn't really describe the change to the nose of the board with its more bulbous shape, but that aside, it's pretty accurate. I did have some footage of the 63 litre and the 73 litre side by side, but I seem to have misplaced that, so we'll just have to make do with on the water footage for the 63 litre. For my comparison of the FR to an NG, we will be comparing my 60 litre NG that I've owned for the best part of a year to the 63 litre FR. The 73 litre, I'll make some comments with regard to how it feels compared to the Skybrid, but ideally that comparison should be between the Skybrid and the 83 litre FR, but for various weather related reasons I just wasn't able to demo the 83 litre, and that was due to a lack of wind. We had a period where there was just no wind at all, or when I could borrow it, it was out on demo to other Swift Foiling customers, and so unfortunately that opportunity slipped by the wayside. I'm going to start this review talking about the 73 litre FR from Swift Foiling. This is because this board I can review just in its own right without comparison to an equivalent NG board. I rode the 73 litre FR back to back with the Skybrid 85 litre, and it may be interesting to compare and contrast those two boards, although a better comparison would be to the 70 litre Skybrid. One thing to pick up on immediately is the ease of which these boards can be mounted in the water. A 73 litre is below my body weight at 80 kilograms, but the extra length and the extra volume up front in the nose of the board makes this 73 litre FR very easy to manage, despite being minus 7 litres to my weight. The 73 litre FR reminded me a lot of my old 80 litre NG board for ease of mounting. It is of course less volume once you stand up or run out of wind, and then things do become more tricky, but with wind to put pressure in the wing, getting onto the board is pretty easy overall. As soon as you stand up, the board is keen to gather speed, which reminds me of my light wind mid-length board from Swift Foiling. However, before we get overexcited, I should point out that the mid-length board from Swift Foiling that I have, which is 6'6" by 19, is much easier to get up on foil than the FR. So if you're looking at this FR as the solution to not needing a light wind board, then whilst it certainly gets going much more easily than the NG board, it isn't on par with a mid-length. Once up on foil, you feel the light weight of this board in carbon construction. It's very reactive and feels like a smaller board due to that lack of weight. This may or may not suit you. If you like your board reactive to your weight movements, then you will like it. If you prefer a much more roll stable and less reactive board, then you may not like it. This is a contrast to the Skybrid, which is a heavier construction, and you do feel that the Skybrid is somewhat less reactive than the Swift Foiling board due to that extra weight. I would say that the Skybrid is a little more stable in the roll axis, as it has boxier rails and a more squared off nose and tail, which both aid roll stability when you're first getting onto the board. When you're on foil, you don't really notice the extra length of the FR. Some of the board's length is behind you due to the forward foil track positioning, so it doesn't actually feel like a longer board. The nose in front of you is very similar to what you might have on an NG board, and I really didn't notice the extra length. I did notice the reduced width. It didn't affect my stance at all, but it did mean I could bank the board much harder before catching a rail. The other standout thing about this board was the touchdowns. It has an amazing ability to just bounce back up from touchdowns, and it doesn't deviate on its course at all. The Skybrid is also good with touchdowns, but the Swift Foiling board has the better characteristics, as the Skybrid's hard rails can catch, whereas the FR doesn't catch at all with its more rounded front rails. This touchdown capability on the FR was very welcome, as touchdowns on the NG can be a bit hit and miss. If you go in at too high an angle, the nose will bury on an NG, which on the FR just didn't seem to happen, despite me trying some very aggressive deliberate touchdowns to try and make it fail. Overall, it's a pitch stable ride, but you still have a good amount of reactivity when you want to pitch or roll. The main thing that I would say is a negative for the FR, and where the NG has an advantage, is jumping with rotations, for example a frontside 360. Length really doesn't help with rotational moves, so if this is your favourite thing to do, then the FR may not be your cup of tea. For everything else Freeride, I don't see any downsides other than whether you can fit the board in your car with its extra bit of length. If I was to summarise Skybrid versus FR 73 litre, then I would give the Skybrid the edge when off foil as a more stable platform to climb onto, but I would prefer the FR on foil as it is lighter and more reactive, has a better touchdown response, and with regard to ease of getting onto foil, I would struggle to separate the two of them. They're very, very similar. So let's put the 73 litre to one side now, and we'll move on to directly comparing my 60 litre NG and the 63 litre FR. First, it would be right to point out that the 60 litre NG and the 63 litre FR are significantly lower volume than my weight at 80 kilograms. As such, the expectation is that both of these boards will sink to some degree under my weight. If we take the 60 litre NG first, it is wider than the 63 litre FR, and as such stability in the roll axis is better, but due to its short length and low volume in the nose, it's also quite unstable in the pitch axis, so balancing on knees to then power the wing and stand does present a reasonable workout for my core muscles in keeping it all in check. With the FR, the only axis that requires management is the roll axis. It's significantly more stable in the pitch axis, and particularly the nose is quite hard to sink, unlike the NG 6 litre where sinking the nose is really very easy. So of the two, the FR is quite significantly easier to mount and pick up the wing on your knees, although we can attribute a little of that to the extra 3 litres of buoyancy it has over the 60 litre NG. When it comes to standing and pumping onto foil, again the FR is much easier, not least because it's not easy to sink the nose, whereas the 60 litre NG can easily bury the nose when pumping onto foil. Whilst talking about the nose volume helping, this is also the case for touchdowns. Touchdowns on the 63 litre FR are amazing. It just bounces back up and barely deviates from its course at all. The NG is really not so good at this, and it is again easy to bury the nose on a touchdown and go over the front if you aren't quick to transfer your weight to the back foot. Up on foil, the 63 litre FR doesn't actually feel any bigger in length than the 60 litre NG, due to some of the length being behind you as well as in front. The other noticeable element is the reactivity of the 63 litre FR compared to my 60 litre NG. The difference between the two is my 60 litre NG is carbon negra and therefore a heavier board, and the carbon construction of the FR without the negra makes it lighter. As such, the FR feels more reactive and responsive when up on foil. The reality here is that if you're just freeriding and doing basic jumps and foiling tricks, then the FR is far and away the better board. It's easier to get on, it's easier to pump onto foil, and it's more reactive when up on foil, plus it has better touchdown characteristics, and you can bank it harder due to its reduced width. The only place the NG wins is if you plan to do jumps with rotations, and here the NG makes much more sense as its lower length makes rotations faster and landing from rotations less dangerous. Plus you can finish rotations after landing as it's easier to rotate the board on the water, whereas the FR being longer tends to want to just go straight. I do plan to do rotational jumps, and as such for me right now the 60 litre NG still represents a fuller capability for me than the FR, but for the majority of foilers who may either not jump or jump but don't do rotations, the FR represents a more suitable specification. So as an overall summary, if you aren't jumping and doing rotations, then go for the FR. It's the easier to use and more capable board. If you do plan to do rotations in your jumps and currently have an NG board, then you may want to stick with it. Thank you to Swift Foiling for lending me the boards for demo, which enabled this comparison and review, and I'll put their links in the description. So that's everything for this particular video. I hope it's been useful. If it has, then please subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you on the next one.